Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying our podcast and have a recommendation about someone you think that we should have on to share their voice and journey with the world, by all means, let us know. It could be an aid worker, monastic, author, journalist, doctor, resistance leader, really anyone with some tie or another to the ongoing situation in Myanmar. To offer up a name, go to our website, insightmyanmar.org, and let us know. But for now, just sit back and take a listen to today's podcast.
And welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the political dimension across ASEAN and the broader Asian context, comparing it to the types of political philosophies and responses that we have seen from the focus that we've had on the predominantly Western responses to Myanmar, and examining the historical and cultural underpinnings of the situation in which we find ourselves. My guest today is Calvin. I'd like to invite Calvin to introduce himself for the audience. So please let us know who you are and what you do.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for inviting me. Hello there. This is Calvin Khoe. I am the co-director at Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, Research and Analysis. This is a foreign policy organization based in Jakarta. We would be said as the largest foreign policy group in the region because we have 100,000 people in our network. And me personally have been heavily working on ASEAN and other geopolitical stuff. My passion is very heavily on foreign relations and particularly my home region, South Asia. Thanks, Brad.
Excellent. Okay, so obviously we have a crisis happening right now in Myanmar, just to jump straight into it. And there has been a lot of focus on the actions that have been taken by individual ASEAN countries and the actions that have been taken by ASEAN as a whole. And there's been a lot of contrast, people comparing the responses from ASEAN nations and ASEAN as an organization to the responses from Western nations and the responses from the European Union. And it appears that Western nations and Western international organizations or intergovernmental organizations are more interested in direct intervention. And it appears that ASEAN has been taking a much more conservative approach, less direct, less hands-on. Would you say that that's a fair comparison to make, or is that a misunderstanding of the situation?
Thanks, Brad. Excellent questions. I think my value to be at your podcast is having a perspective from within Southeast Asia, particularly from Indonesia. So I will speak on behalf of myself, definitely, but speaking from the perspective of Jakarta, right? So I want to start with numbers. Me, myself, has been a program coordinator for ASEAN China Survey in the past 3 years. This is a survey initiated by Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. And this is a survey that focuses on how Southeast Asian sees China's. But in the survey, I also asked in the past 3 years, particularly about the Myanmar situations. So let me just push the needles on the numbers. So I asked the questions on this year's survey. The questions was, is ASEAN's effort to address Myanmar political crisis on the right track? right? A pretty straightforward questions. This questions is answered by 1,658 more or less Southeast Asian respondents across 10 ASEAN countries, including Myanmar itself. So, how the respondents' answers to these questions? Let me repeat the questions. Is ASEAN's effort to address Myanmar political crisis on the right track? So the result is a little bit interesting for my end, right? So 50% said on the right track, 13% said not on the right track. Okay, and then ASEAN is not attentive and responsive enough for 27%. ASEAN is too slow in addressing the crisis, 24%, and I have no opinion for 18%, right? The majority are found in answers of ASEAN is not attentive and responsive enough. Seconding to that is ASEAN is too slow in addressing the crisis. Now, how about the Myanmar herself, right? The respondent directly from Myanmar, our friends. Definitely, the majority says that ASEAN is too slow in addressing the crisis with 35%. And 27%, seconding to that, is that ASEAN is not attentive and responsive enough. 17% says that it's not, sorry, let me correct it. 27%, seconding to the ASEAN is too slow, is not on the right track. I think this is a predicted sentiment coming from Myanmar. So, what does this survey mean to all listeners? Is that here? I'm talking from the leader's perspective. The leader's perspective of ASEAN has been capsulated into the formulations of 5-point consensus. So everything about Myanmar should goes in principles of the 5PC. Now, talking from the perspective of the grassroots, not much progressing, right? And not much progressing. The question is, this situation is very associated with the political will of parties involved in Myanmar. So I'm not talking only about the NUG or SAC, but also all the ethnic related groups. I think the political will is the dominant factors to push the progress in the ground, right? Now the question is, as you asked, is it fair of ASEAN approach? So from ASEAN perspective, right? This is a bit complex answers, but the first principles that I want listeners knows is the difference of way and approach of ASEAN people. ASEAN as a nature of organization, but also ASEAN in terms of way it works that associated with our principles. But let me simplify. ASEAN is ASEAN does not like too much posturing and also megaphone messaging. One about posturing. We avoid a kind of photo op, a kind of conversation that bring to the public, which contains a lot of sensitive and ongoing discussion to the public, right? And we prefer to approach these political situations in the backstage, right, behind the curtain. However, even though it sounds like there's not much transparency, it's actually not. ASEAN has a character of talking to everybody, talking to adversaries, talking to foes, talking to best friends, talking to everyone. Because of talkings, we can settle things, right? So that's how the ASEAN's approaching Myanmar situation, not only now, but also in the previous episodes of Myanmar situations. What Indonesia did, what ASEAN did, is always talking to everybody. And I think this is the same approach that ASEAN currently doing and Indonesian government doing in the context of Indonesia's chairmanship 2023. So we talk to everybody, we engage them, and then we avoid posturing from the public eyes, keep quiet, and then push for a progress and put the domestic actors as the star in the stage. I mean, it's better to be seen that the internal actors are the one who initiate all those stuff, right? And the external actors, including ASEAN countries, is not a main actor on the ground, but as the supporters and facilitators, actors in the backstage. So that kind of approach that ASEAN has been doing and has been consistent in dealing to all such of political crisis in the region. However, we need also to recognize the situations of trending in the about transparency, about public's demands more on knowings about the progress. Public's demands more to be brief about every diplomatic movement, or public's demands more concrete result on diplomatic process, right? So that is reality on the ground. My observation, the government, I'm talking about the government of non-Myanmar country, yeah, the ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, in dealing with the Myanmar situation. The government should be very prudent in messaging to the public. In one side, the government should make sure the ongoing discussion should be continued. The trust should be still gained from all actors in the ground. But at the another side, they need also to open up doors to more dialogues, discussion, briefing to the public, right? So never leave the public in the dark. We need to continue update them about the situations, about the feelings of the government, but at the same time maintaining a close communication with all partners on the ground. So that's how the difference of approach in ASEAN. Another principles, and I think this would be very beneficial for the listeners, is that this is a very Southeast Asian way of seeing. We see Myanmar as a family. This is not about the jargons or about terminologies in good speeches. No, family means is that we can tell what we are really thinking about, right? We don't exclude Myanmar, but we tell to the SAC, hey, what you did is wrong, right? What you does is not right. And we are here as an older brother to see you and to talk to you and help you to find a way out of this diluted situations. We should understand also the feelings of all actors in Myanmar, NUG, SAC, and all the ethnic groups, right? We should understand them and also talk to them, right? So this is the principles of looking them as a family, and once you ASEAN, never as once ASEAN, forever you are ASEAN. You are part of the family, so we can tell everything. Like you, Brad, you had a you if you have sister or siblings or dad or mom, you can speak any you can speak in a liberty to them about your feelings. I think that applies the same thing in ASEAN family. So that's how we are approaching to the situation. So we don't make a distance to them. We don't punish them with sanctions, with anything, right? That very harsh. But we tell them the truth. Even right now, you know that in the summit level and the political meetings, Myanmar representative is now being banned, right, to participate. This I'm not seeing this is as a form of punishment. This is a form of a strong signal to our brother. Hey, you have crossed the line, and you cannot attend the political meetings, but you still can attend non-political meetings. Uh, a permission to attend non-political meeting is actually a message that I'm still here as a brother, right? I want to still talk to you, but please, you need to change your behavior. So that's the C, and you should know the decision to ban, yeah, to put out the political rep of Myanmar in the political meeting of ASEAN processes. That decision were made up in a very long process of consultation and discussion. It took around a year after the coup happened, and that decision were made, right? Not because of too slow, but I see it ASEAN trying to take the most prudent decisions on dealing with our Myanmar brothers, right? Because the situation is so sensitive on the ground. So that's how I see it from the ASEAN perspective on dealing with the situation in Myanmar. And in short, the questions that you were asked, Brad, cannot be simplified whether ASEAN being fair or not. But ASEAN is trying to be creative and trying to approach in all angles. But we should be admitted also that our attempt uh, needs to be reviewed, and reviewed in the terms of why the 5PC does not comes into a very positive progress, right? So we need to review why that doesn't work. We need also to be more creative on approaching them. Yes, we did engage everybody, but we need also to be more creative to push the political will, because I don't see the political will or all actors in particularly SAC on the ground. So that's how I see it, Brett.
Okay, so you've opened the door to a few things. I mean,
Mhm.
not to put it very depressingly, but when you talk about this idea of, well, we're family, so we don't punish one another, you know, in especially in the Western way of thinking, what comes to my mind is a village where you know that your brother is an alcoholic and that he's beating his wife, but you don't do anything to stop this. You just tell him, we know what you're doing, we want you to stop.
Yeah.
And then he cries and he promises that he will stop, and then he does it again, and then you talk to him again, and then he does it again. At what point do we have to say, this person is not going to voluntarily stop? We can't convince them with argument. We have to intervene, whether it means we have to call the police, whether it means we have to have them committed to rehabilitation, whether it means we have to get a psychiatrist, whatever. We have to do something for the safety of the wife, for the safety of the children, even for the safety of the brother himself, who might be drinking himself to death. To look at the economic situation in Myanmar, to look at the electricity crisis in Myanmar, to look at the refugee crisis. The country as a whole is degrading in terms of its capacity to function, and people are dying in large numbers. So at what point would ASEAN look at this situation and say, okay, the death toll is very high and the progress has not been sufficient, do we need to engage more directly? Is there any line that will be crossed here?
Thank you, Brett. That's a very good analogy. So, I want to invite the listeners and you to see ASEAN in two different prims. So, the first prims ASEAN as a regional organization, and the second ASEAN as individual countries. So, we have 9 out of Myanmar, right? And Indonesia is the largest. Now, talking from the first prims of ASEAN as a regional organizations, this is unfortunately to say our hands is bind, right? We cannot do much. We are binded with all the principles that we have. I mean binding in talking about direct interventions, right? In kind of all forms, right? This is things that you have been watching and have been criticizing on ASEAN, right? If you see it on ASEAN in that way, so this is what you say. Unfortunately, our hands are binded, so we can do much in terms of directly intervention. And ASEAN, by DNA, is not organizations that designed to intervening in that kind of such situations. So that's, I hope that listeners can understand. But ASEAN has a very strategic function to continue the processes of talkings and also the processes of pushing pushing and give pressures on every single individual country, right? And particularly Myanmar. Now, I want to take the conversations to the second prims, which is the prims of the individual countries of ASEAN. So this is the two prisms always complete to one another, right? Complete the pictures. Why? Why is that? ASEAN is a leader-driven organization. It's a very elitist organization. It's driven by the 10 individuals, of leaders, right? And talking about the individual country, the Myanmar situation is now at the levels of how the leaders of 10 and the leaders of 9, except Myanmar, can expedite and intervene as an individual country. I'm not talking about military interventions, but what I can say is that what we see in the public, it doesn't mean that the individual countries does not intervene, could be politically to the domestic, to SAC, for instance, right? Like, let me give you an example on Cambodian situations. In the Cambodian situations, Indonesia at the end, once the crisis in Cambodia finished, we openly said we are intervene in terms of politically talking directly and suggesting what should better to do, and even invite them to have a cocktail party in Jakarta to settle all the things. That was an intervention of Indonesia, which cannot be done by ASEAN, right? But done by Indonesia as a big brother in the country, and also supported by all the rest of ASEAN, particularly ASEAN 5, the founders of ASEAN. So I think the same thing happening also to Myanmar, right? Lee Hsien Loong, as the longest serving ASEAN leaders that's still in the office, I think has a lot of voices to Myanmar, including to Thailand. The most, in my perspective, Thai government is one of the most hurt by the SAC. And I think the prime ministers also talk frankly to them. The visits of the Cambodian prime minister to Myanmar, I think he also had talked very in a strong tone to the leaders of SAC. And then from my end, Indonesian government, my government initiated the special summit in Jakarta. So my president calls the rest of 10, including the SAC, hey, you should come over to Jakarta and sit down and talk about these things. This is an intervention, right? This is an intervention of how we are saying directly and how we are pushing them to going to the right course, right? This is not. I'm not talking about sending, I don't know, groups of to Myanmar and then pushing for something. This is not about that thing. This is the intervention directly coming from the individual countries in all means and all measures. From all the 10, the most loud and most consistent is Myanmar and Indonesia and Malaysia. Both of us are very strong on SAC, right? Even my foreign minister publicly saying over and over again our disappointment to SAC, and the Malaysians also did the same thing. Singapore has a lot of stake on economic stake in Myanmar, and I believe Lee Hsien Loong also using his carrot and stick to Myanmar as well to push something happening. So this game is really circled back to the political will of SAC and also the political wills of NUG and others, right? What we can do is pushing to that way. What we could be minimum can do is, I don't know, if there's a question, will ASEAN come up with the sanctions of embargoes or stuff like that? I think that would be too far.
Okay, so this is another topic that I'm very interested in. The SAC. So most in the West take the view that the SAC, because it seized power illegally, it's a military coup, all these sorts of things. Even if a Western power does not recognize the NUG, it also will not recognize the SAC. It seems to be the position of ASEAN to say, well, look, if we don't talk to the SAC, then we can't achieve anything, right? We need to recognize the SAC. But I wonder, is there any sort of metric? Is there any measurement that ASEAN uses to determine legitimacy? Is it the position of ASEAN that the SAC and the military coup are the legitimate government, or is it just the position of ASEAN that they exist, they have power, and therefore we need to be dealing with them? What's the perspective there?
I think we are still far away from the discussion of legitimizing the authority in Myanmar, right? I just want to repeat that the invitations of all ASEAN meeting to the Myanmar authority is not a form of recognizing the SAC as the legitimate and legal government of Myanmar. That is far from that point, right? But by the way, I'm not also referred to use the word of acknowledging SAC, but I see it of how ASEAN looking SAC as actors that should be engaged alongside with the NUG, right? But talking about, I see it here, legitimizing, I think, is still far away because there are a lot of steps to be done before we coming to that discussions, right? 2023 should be their election year according to their constitutions of 8 or 18, I forgot. Correct me if I'm wrong.
2008.
Yes, 2008, right? 2023 should be the election. So I think next year is definitely could be the peak of their domestic political crisis, right? How the SAC could come to their promise on having the elections will definitely could be, I don't know whether NUG can be contested on that election or not, or what kind of formulations of election that could be done in next year. And ASEAN is very abide to the law and norms. If now, let's say we recognize the current constitutions, right? I mean, the constitutions of 2008, and even we asked everybody is there in Myanmar, is there any way out of the conflicting constitutions, right? We even asked because we want to be abide and going along with the rules that been made by the Myanmar itself, right? So 2020 could be the peak in my point of view, and I think ASEAN will offer our best help to Myanmar in conducting the elections. Like, Indonesia is a country with the we have a capability in organizing, hosting, and conducting the largest election in one day. Right? India has the largest election with billions of people, but Indonesia is the largest that conducted in one day. Right? 200 million election, 200 million people to vote. So we have that capability. We can help them, offering a lot of facilities on supporting logistic everything for the elections here. I believe that also become one of the pointers in the meeting notes between my foreign minister to all the stakeholders in Myanmar. This, which I believe also we help them what you need, right? Do you want to have international international observers? Which one you convenient? Do you want it? UN observers, or I think it's better to have ASEAN observers or Indonesian observers with others, ASEAN countries observers. So a lot of steps to come into that discussion, Brett, about the legitimacy, and I think election year should be passed first, and I think after next year the discussion could be come to that point, or it could be another years to come to that point.
So I'm really glad you brought up the elections, because I'm not going to put you in the position of making an official statement about the elections, because I know that would be very politically awkward. But it is generally the attitude of, again, much of the West to discount the elections because we have seen evidence of electoral fraud by the military, very famously in the 2008 constitutional referendum, very famously in the 2010 election, and of course, most shocking was the 1990 general election, where the military lost, and in response, they, after the fact, annulled the legitimacy of the election and arrested the leaders of the NLD, which is very similar to what they did in 2021 in the coup. So the likelihood, it is widely believed, is that either the military will simply not allow certain pro-democracy parties to be registered. Everyone has to register their political party currently with the military-controlled electoral commission, or they will allow them to register, they will allow them to contest the election, but then they will have many of their own people, government staff, police, military, voting not secretly and voting on military bases, which they've done in the past, ballot stuffing, discounting certain regions where they are likely to lose on claims of COVID, on claims of political instability, on claims of security situation, and so on, and effectively manipulating the outcome to give themselves a sense of legitimacy. So there are a lot of concerns, and we can say conspiracy theory, there's no evidence that this will happen. Yes, the international observers would be a very, very, very big factor, whether the military genuinely allows international observers or not. Indonesia, as a genuinely democratic country, is in a very special position to be able to facilitate something like this. And we don't know how the military would respond. But is it generally, do you think, the view of ASEAN that the elections, if they are held in 2023, and it is very likely that they will be held, do you think the view of ASEAN that the elections will be considered to be legitimate and the outcome of those elections will be considered representative of the will of the Myanmar people?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's a very good, interesting questions. We're not talking about legitimizing the elections or not, right? But I want to invite the listeners to think about this. We should be very rational in dealing with Myanmar, right? We need to be sober in seeing what are the options and processes that are now on the ground. Definitely, the election is one of the big process that in the ground and acknowledged by the SAC. They should acknowledge because it's based on the constitution, and we should go to that process, right? Because what else? Then I want to ask you guys, what else? What are the options if not going to that process, right? What we can do is to help and make sure the process going well and minimizing those kind of what we are very worried about. Again, this is a very domestic things on Myanmar, but I think ASEAN countries as an individual has a stake to say to the Myanmar government, right? Here's the thing. I believe one country, um, any authorities that claiming the legitimacy. Um, Myanmar is a big country, right? Myanmar, if not mistaken, is second or third largest by populations in Southeast Asia. Um, I think none of authority. Here's the thing: every authority that claiming themselves wants public support, and there's no such authority want to see their people suffering. And I think now we are already at the point where the peoples are has been right suffering even worsen, and I think this is the time, you know, to tell to both stakeholders, including the biggest one, NUG and the SAC, particularly the SAC. Hey, you need to come up with your own formulation how to find a way out from this situation, right? You should come. You need to see it and find a way out, right? Because we have been very tired yelling from outside. Your country is is trembling, well, right? So I think it should come from both sides, right? The authorities in Myanmar should also. I think authorities should aware that this is the time to talk and lay out what they want and find their own formulations how to settle these things. Or you want to see the people's way, the people's become more sovereign and yielding to another problems could be what terrorism, what endemic, or a lot of things could happen, or civil wars, endless civil wars happen. Um, that's that thing. And ASEAN, um, individual countries, ASEAN countries cannot stand still. We need to act in a say using all means that we have, using all means that along with our principles. I'm not talking about the principle of non-interventions. I'm not talking about that because ASEAN countries has been intervening to one another by saying, by advising, by suggesting, right, and telling what's good for the regions and not. And I think that's the observation that I can share. Right?
Fair enough. And so on this, I want to sort of segue into something that I know that you and I discussed the last time that we spoke, and this is more the historical underpinning because it is very evident, regardless of how we might feel, it is objectively the case that the Western philosophy and the Western political approach and the ASEAN philosophy and ASEAN political approach are different. They clearly view the situation very differently. And speaking of the culture of militaries, there seems to be a very different view, like automatic different assumptions being made about militaries in Western nations and in ASEAN nations. And not just ASEAN, but the broader Asian sphere. I know that Japan, for example, has had experience with militarism. I know that South Korea has had experience with militarism. Um, there is a military in power currently in Thailand. We can say to varying extents that Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam are under military systems, or we could say one-party communist systems. Indonesia used to be under a military regime, so but today is democratic. So what is the general view within ASEAN of the military taking over power? Is there a certain sense, for historical reasons, that people view this as sometimes good and sometimes necessary, or do the people have a bad memory of military governments and they have an immediate negative reaction towards them? What's the general interpretation here?
Thank you. Disclaimer: I'm speaking not as a historian or as a expert on Myanmar or expert on military and civil relations, but I speak based on my observations as a person who studied Southeast Asia study during my school um, for 3 years. So I'm investing myself on Southeast Asia studies for 3 years, and now I'm working for almost 7 years in as professional in international relations and dealing in ASEAN countries. Okay, so I see a military as a organization that has a feeling of possession to the country very much. So I'm talking in the context of ASEAN countries, particularly Indonesia. For instance, Indonesian military were born before Indonesia independence. So technically, my military organization were born before the country was born. Right? And the military was part of the struggle and become the main actors of the struggle on my country independence alongside with our diplomats and our fighters. So that's the point. So the feeling of ownership, the feeling as the last guardian, the feeling of the main actor that unites the whole country and securing the motherland is the military. So that is what I see and feel in Indonesia, how the military see themselves. Somehow they see themselves bigger than the country. Somehow, right? This is my personal observations. But in Indonesia case, my military were reformed by themselves, within themselves, and they see the importance of professional military, that military focus on all the military affairs, not intervening on the civil affairs. And the government should be civilian government and should be led by the civilians. So the government and civil military should be as what should be, right? So that Indonesia context. But I would invite you to take a look on the Philippines. Take a look on the Philippines. The military is very strong. But take a look on Thailand, right? The military is very strong and has the same feelings that the military is the last guardian and are an entity that makes sure the unity of the country. And I see this very much in Myanmar. I see this very much in Myanmar. Again, I'm not an expert of Myanmar, but I see this and I feel this in every my conversations with my Myanmar brothers and sisters. And look at all the elite in Myanmar political league. All of them have a military background, even Aung San Suu Kyi's fathers. Right? So the military, I see it this as a last guardian of the unity of Myanmar, and I think at this point they see the country is in danger. That's why they need to jump in whatever others rationals and reasons, right? But I see this that way. Um, I heard from the previous government when my government approaching to the military leadership. I think it was back in. I think it was before the elections of when Aung San Suu Kyi won the elections. I forgot the years. I heard that my government talked to them frankly, not about democracy at the beginning, but talk about um, the strategic interest of national unity. And my government talked to them. I feel the same thing. We feel the same thing about the importance of national unity, and we share the same interests. And this is also resonate by the Myanmar leadership of military that yes, the unity is so important for us. That's why the military should be always be in the government, right? Okay, that's how they do it. That's how they feel it. So we need to understand this nature of the military as an organization and how the military civil relationship in Myanmar. That's why we cannot and never ever to discount the military factor in Myanmar. The military should be the solutions and a way out in today's situations. Right? It's not about making a new military unit. No, about the current military regime. Right? They should be invited as also the solution in the future of Myanmar because this feeling is become a part of their DNA. Right. I asked my friend in Myanmar. I asked one question, which this question is very associated with Indonesian community. The question was, "Hey, is there any feelings of parents that the parents wants to see their kids to be military officers? Because if your kids, son or daughter, become a military officers, it will, provide your family with not only economic guarantee careers but also social status." And my Myanmar's brothers said, "Yes, it was, but I don't see it right now. But there is, I acknowledge, I feel that happening in a lot of Myanmar's parents that wants to see their kids and their kids to become military officers or become a civil servants." That's also happening here in Indonesia. Right? So these two the examples of the same feelings of how the military is playing a very, I would say, a very strategic role in the operations of a state is we cannot discount it.
And so this sort of leads us to a topic that I know that you have a lot of views on. I know that you want to sort of dispel this narrative because even you, coming from that Indonesian perspective, a democratic country, you have this perspective of militaries as intrinsic to the state and very very powerful organizations and organizations that have the potential for good. And there is among Western commentators a very strong narrative that ASEAN is fundamentally divided between the predominantly militarist and dictatorial continental ASEAN countries, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and the predominantly more democratic insular countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines. Brunei is obviously a sort of special case. So what is your perspective on this idea that ASEAN is fundamentally two different things, the more dictatorial, militaristic continental ASEAN and the more democratic, more liberal island ASEAN?
Oh, yeah, thank you. You know what? ASEAN is the most diverse regional organization in the world. Tell me one organizations of internation that has the full-fledged democracy like Indonesia. You have a communist state country like Vietnam, socialist communist. You have Islamic sultanate countries like Brunei. You have a monarchy like Thailand, a sultanate democracy like Malaysia, and you name it. There's no such thing other than ASEAN. So ASEAN, from the beginning, already diverse. But what unites ASEAN? The feeling of wanting to be independent and having a strategic autonomy and not having someone big asking and pointing out what we should do. that feeling unites us and help us to create a lot of principles, ASEAN centrality, treaty amity of cooperations, nuclear zone, free zone of nuclears, so on and so forth. So, however, I need also to acknowledge that ASEAN right now, today's ASEAN, is ASEAN individual countries are very hard to come into a um, uh, a solid positions on political issues. Right? Um, we are not that easy right now, and yes, there is a strong differences on how those ten see the politicals uh, events or episodes in the world or in East Asia or you can say in Indo-Pacific. Yes, we need to acknowledge that. Uh, but in regards of that, in terms of Myanmar, I think all 10, all 9 wants Myanmar to be stabilized. Why? Because Myanmar is part of the ASEAN, part of the family, and if Myanmar get worsens, it will affecting the rest of the 9, uh, or could be the rest of the 10 with Timor-Leste in the with Timor-Leste in the future time. That's what I can say. The division is there, but the ASEAN principles and processes are working every year. I can be different today, but tomorrow I'll see you to talk. That's a good thing, The differences is there, and then the talking is continuous. So ASEAN cannot be simplified by those democratic and non-democratic countries. No, cannot be simplified as that point. Cannot be simplified because of that. The decisions would be different on ASEAN full-fledged democracy Indonesia and also ASEAN and then Cambodia or Laos. Looking at no, definitely different. Like my Cambodian friend says that Cambodian championship in 2022 this year, they feel they have a better understanding on Myanmar compared to the Indonesian because they are closer by nature, closer by culture. They understand the not only the culture but also the way of life of the Myanmar people. They said maybe Myanmar has a better chance to the Indonesians. That's what my Cambodian friend said. But the feeling the same. The Cambodian said, "Hey, if Myanmar getting worsens, it's also bad for us as a Cambodian, but also for the region, also for you, Indonesia. So that's why let's work together in a different way and approach how to settle this." So I think in terms of end goal of the Myanmar should be settled and find a way out is I think the interest of all parents, the interest of all 9. But the difference is lies on the way and approaches, and and I think every day we're working on it how to find the commonalities. So that's a good thing about ASEAN. We always talk about commonalities despite of our differences and acknowledge we have a differences.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And so, moving to the end of our discussion, let's open it up a little bit, and let's talk about the relationship that China has to this whole situation. I mean, ASEAN seems to have a very strong connection to China. China has a very strong connection to ASEAN. Taken collectively, they are the 2 biggest fish in the Asian sphere. So it makes sense that they would have strong ties. And China has also been heavily involved in Myanmar. It has been involved in the crisis in Myanmar. So how do you see this? Do you see ASEAN and China as collaborating potentially down the road and forming a unified front to try and bring a resolution to the Myanmar and try to facilitate the peace process? Or do you see China and ASEAN as basically doing their own independent policies when it comes to this crisis?
So, first point, I appreciate China always consult with us, ASEAN, in terms of Myanmar, because they do also respect how to solve Myanmar is through the 5 point consensus and through the ASEAN processes. So that formally and in terms of policies, that I can very appreciate to China. Yes, we are very close with China. I think we're the closeness between ASEAN and China is, I think, coming by nature, because we have been bothered with them for 2,000 years, more than 1,000 years, and our trade is so close, and our geographic location is so, our proximity is so close. So I think it's become by nature, so we're very close. But in terms of seeing China and Myanmar, or you would mean the SAC are collaborating, this is something that I cannot be commented with, because what I know that China also maintain communication with everybody's there, just like what ASEAN does. So I cannot see it that they are leaning much more on SAC or not leaning to the NUG. I cannot say about that. But I want to speak on behalf of my survey. So on ASEAN China survey, we asked questions. Has China roles with regard to Myanmar political crisis been contributing positively to ASEAN efforts in addressing the conflicts? That's my questions. And the answers is that 46% says not clear, right? Not clear. And 19% says no, 20% says no opinion, and only 13% said yes. So ASEAN is a bit in the dark in how seeing China's role on Myanmar. I think that's a fair conclusion. But let's take a look how the Myanmar people see that questions, right? So 47% says not clear as well. 50% and both 15% sharing the same number says yes and no on how they see China place on the ground. So I think fair to say, ASEAN people, most of them, not most of them, I mean ASEAN people assumes not clear assumptions on how to see China's roles in Myanmar situations. But I do also ask another questions. But we need also to acknowledge that Myanmar location sits in a very strategic important to China. Why? Because Myanmar sits directly to Indian Oceans, and I know that China has an interest to have a direct access to Indian Ocean, not by circling around the Malacca Strait.
Mm.
I know Myanmar has that strategic interest of China, and I know China also has a lot of economic stake in Myanmar. That's why I think China tried to maintain all contacts, and in terms of legitimizing, in terms of leanings, I don't know, in terms of legitimizing, in terms of policies, I think China will never far away from ASEAN narrative.
Interesting. And I don't know if you can really speak on this. I know your focus is more towards the relationship with China, but you've mentioned the strategic impact of Myanmar, and getting around the Strait of Malacca is a huge motivating factor for China. The potential for an embargo across ASEAN is something that I know China has been very aggravated by in the past. And Chinese conflict with some ASEAN member states, particularly Philippines, Vietnam, through the controversy in the South China Sea, has driven their need for a more westerly passage. But this in turn will certainly raise eyebrows among the Indians, who would be very concerned with Chinese naval capabilities so close to their eastern border, particularly when on their west they have Pakistan, a hostile country who is also allied to China. Is there any sort of interaction going on between India and ASEAN, to your knowledge, to also try to resolve the Myanmar crisis?
What I know, India is a country that should be consulted by ASEAN in terms of Myanmar as well, right? I mean, India, in terms of geographic proximity to Myanmar, and also India's focus to look to the east, right? That's their policies of look to the east. I think India is a significant country to be consulted by ASEAN. I think the communication is going on, and also I think New Delhi and also Jakarta, I think back and forth also talking about ASEAN, talking about Myanmar situations, and I think they are also actively advising us on how to deal with Myanmar.
So then, what I would like to do at this point is just to invite you to leave our listeners with any thoughts about what we've discussed today, or other topics, which you would like them to consider and to mull over as they go about their day.
Okay, so listeners, this is Calvin from Jakarta, Indonesia. What I would like to say, particularly if you are coming from the side of the world that trying to understand Southeast Asia and Myanmar, we feel the same thing as you, which is our frustrations on what's happening on the ground. We want to save life. We want to make the Myanmar becoming a well-functioned government as it was, and even more thriving. We want, as Indonesians, I want to see democracy flourish in Myanmar. But please, never and do not discount ASEAN effort. ASEAN is not standstill. ASEAN is not just sit down and watch. We do in a way how we do it, and please give us trust. I'm not pleading. I'm not pleasing. I'm not pleading, but I just want to say we also doing something. Not something. We do something to push the needles. Right? So please do not discount ASEAN efforts. But please continue criticizing us. Please continue give comments, suggestions, right? And just believe on the process, and believe on the course. We are maintaining the good course and maintaining in the right ends, which is to find a leeway on the situation in Myanmar. And I want to say also thank you to all the sympathy and also support to Myanmar brother and sister. I think they need our constance and continuous support to them. I think activities like Inside Myanmar podcast and also Better Buma, I think you did a very excellent job. So that's it, Brad. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode in full. And if you've gotten this far, then you've heard much of what this important guest has to say. And if you found their story of value, please consider taking a further step beyond just being a listener and becoming an active supporter. Any donation you provide is now going to support the democracy movement in Myanmar, to help those being impacted by the current crisis. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.